I am Amparita Sta, the Director of the Graduate Legal Studies Institute of the Ateneo Law School and the Director of the Urduja Women's Desk of the Ateneo Human Rights Center. I will talk about the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, or CEDAW, women's rights. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, or the CEDAW, entered into force on September 3, 1981. The UN Charter, which is the foundational treaty of the United Nations, was the first international agreement to articulate respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and the right to equal treatment without discrimination on the basis of sex. This non discrimination theme is found in all the core human rights instruments. But although the Civil and Political Rights and the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights Convention already enumerate the human rights of every person and the protection and promotion of these rights without discrimination on the basis of sex, there was a realization that these general provisions on equality and non discrimination did not necessarily reflect the particular and specific issues confronting women in their daily lives. For instance, Article 23 of the Civil and Political Rights Convention guarantees the right of men and women of marriageable age to marry and to found a family, and to be married only with free and full consent of the intending spouses. It did not deal, however, with the consequence of women losing their nationality or citizenship upon their marriage to foreigners. Of course, losing citizenship merely on account of marriage to foreigners has never been a problem for men. Article 24 of the same convention guarantees the right of every child to acquire a nationality, but was silent as to whose nationality the child should follow. So a convention on women was seen as necessary in order to address the need for a more comprehensive and targeted focus on issues relevant to women. Because despite the existence of other human rights instruments, the discrimination that women experience does not seem to be squarely be addressed. Thus, discrimination continues, resulting in the violation of women's enjoyment of rights on an equal footing with men. So, as far as the right to marry, CEDAW provides that the right to marry of a woman should not come at the cost of losing her nationality or citizenship. It specifically enjoins states parties to ensure that neither marriage to an alien nor change of nationality by the husband during marriage shall automatically change the nationality of the wife, render her stateless, or force upon her the nationality of her husband, and that they shall grant women equal rights with men with respect to the nationality of their children. Even our own 1935 Constitution provided then that the Philippine citizenship may be lost or reacquired in the manner provided by law. And our law then, Commonwealth Act Number 63, stated that in case of a woman, citizenship may be lost upon her marriage to a foreigner if by virtue of the law in force in her husband's country, she acquires his nationality. We have since changed our constitution, which now provides that citizens of the Philippines may marry aliens, retain their citizenship, unless by their act or omission they are deemed under the law to have renounced it. The CEDAW begins with a definition of discrimination, which is any distinction, exclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex, which has the effect of or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition of or enjoyment of exercise by women of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, and other field, irrespective of their marital status, and on the basis of equality between women and men. CEDAW then describes and establishes a framework that draws on three overarching principles: non discrimination, state obligation, and substantive equality. Non-discrimination. The Convention not only prohibits sex-based discrimination, but expressly prohibits discrimination against women that adversely impacts upon their enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms. CEDAW is not gender neutral. It explicitly addresses the need to eliminate discrimination against women through proactive measures to bring about equality. It recognizes that inequality is socially constructed and mandates states parties to effect structural, social, and cultural changes necessary to correct past and current forms and effects of discrimination against women. The Convention also acknowledges that discrimination against women can take on many forms. Direct discrimination constitutes exclusionary treatment explicitly based on grounds of sex and gender differences. For example, a job opening for a firefighter welcomes only men, but not women, and the posting explicitly requires that only men must apply. Indirect discrimination occurs when a law, policy, program, or practice appears to be facially neutral as it relates to women and men, but in practice has a discriminatory effect on women because of pre-existing inequality, are not addressed by the apparently neutral measure. For instance, although a city does not prohibit women from applying as firefighters, it clearly specifies that applicants must be at least 5 feet and 4 inches tall, even though this has nothing to do with a firefighter's ability to do the job. This would be indirect discrimination against women, since on the average, more women applicants would be excluded than men. Though the requirement does not prohibit women from applying and appears to be gender neutral on its face, in practice, this height requirement negatively and disproportionately affects women applicants. In reality, since firefighters have been stereotyped as a man's job, the specific requirements or characteristics being sought for this job are attributes belonging to men. Intersectionality. Discrimination based on sex and gender is also inextricably linked with other factors such as race, ethnicity, religion, belief, health, status, age, class, caste, and sexual orientation and gender identity. CEDAW mandates that states parties must legally recognize and prohibit intersecting forms of discrimination and their compounded negative impact on women. Certain groups of women are susceptible to and experience particular forms of discrimination. For instance, a Filipina working as a domestic worker abroad may suffer multiple forms of discrimination on the basis of her being a woman, on the basis of her status as a non-citizen or for being an alien, and on her employment status as a domestic worker. Substantive equality. Substantive equality is equality that recognizes the differences between women and men, but at the same time affirms equality between them. This means that women are accorded differential treatment, not because they are weak, but because women's specific situation or conditions are different from men, and that these differences are acknowledged and accommodated so that laws, programs, and even structures are changed and transformed in order for women to be placed in an environment where they can enjoy their human rights and fundamental freedoms on an equal footing with men. True equality is thus achieved through recognition of differences. The Convention looks to transformative equality, which acknowledges and addresses areas of differences rather than treating women and men in an identical manner. Thus, the positive obligations under CEDAW involve changing social and institutional structures. For example, in the field of public life, the workplace, and education. CEDAW places an obligation to correct both de jure and de facto environment that disadvantages women in order to make the playing field even by requiring all initiatives lead to equality of opportunities, equality of access, and equality of results or benefits. For example, if night work is considered not safe for women, a state solution should not to protect them by prohibiting them from working night shifts, thus effectively depriving them of work opportunities and to receive higher pay. The state's response to this problem should be to put enough safeguards and security measures in workplaces, especially at night, and invest in human and financial resources in securing work premises in order for women to be placed in an environment where they can exercise their right to night shift work on equal footing with men. At the same time that the environment for night work becomes safer for everyone, the choice of whether to take on night work or not remains with women, not with the state. In this way, women's agency and their right to decision making are respected. So, in 2010, Republic Act 10151 repealed our labor code's general provision prohibiting women from working from 10 in the evening to 6 in the morning. Aside from this, workers, including pregnant women who cannot temporarily do night work, are guaranteed security of tenure, benefits, and access to promotion in their jobs. Additionally, all night work employees now have the right to have a health assessment free of charge and to receive advice on how to reduce or avoid health problems associated with their night work. State obligations. State parties must address all aspects of their legal obligations under the Convention to respect, protect, and fulfill women's rights to non-discrimination and to ensure the development and advancement of women in order to improve their position to one of de jure as well as de facto equality with men. The obligation to respect requires that states adopt a hands-off policy in that they refrain from making laws, policies, regulations, programs, and institutional structure, or that they remove existing ones that directly or indirectly result in the denial of the equal enjoyment by women of their civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. States must therefore ensure that their policies do not have unseen or unintended adverse consequences for women. The obligation to protect requires that states parties protect women from discrimination, not only from the state agents, but especially from private actors. The legal framework of human rights law is generally focused on the relationship between the individual and the state. But in many cases, the threat comes from private individuals, like spouses, partners, and other members of the family, instead of state agents. Thus, this requires addressing not only the vertical relationship between the state and individuals, but also the horizontal relationships between individuals. Thus, CEDAW requires a state party to take all appropriate measures to eliminate discrimination against women by any person, organization, or enterprise. States parties should take steps directly aimed at eliminating customary and all other practices that prejudice and perpetuate the notion of inferiority or superiority of either of the sexes and of stereotyped roles for women and men. So, for example, a state with a high incidence of violence against women does not provide for a law which names and frames this problem as a violation of women's rights, or as an unlawful act which should be meted out with penalties. Or, for instance, a state does not provide for mechanisms where women are given access to remedies, specifically within the context of violence against women. This party then, the state then, would be in violation of CEDAW, despite the fact that the act is not inflicted by state agents, but by the women's spouses or partners, who are private citizens. It is also the duty of a state to correct and transform society's mindset, to inculcate unto them that getting beaten or being battered should never be a normal occurrence within the family or within a relationship that women should expect when they enter into such relationships. That it is not okay for women to be battered by the husbands or partners as a form of discipline or to teach them a lesson, and that there is nothing domestic about domestic violence because it is a human rights violation, not merely a family or private problem. The state, as a duty bearer, is responsible for preventing its occurrence and protecting its victims and affording them redress. The obligation to fulfill requires that states parties take a wide variety of steps to ensure that women and men enjoy equal rights de jure and de facto, including, where appropriate, the adoption of temporary special measures. This entails obligations of means or conduct and also obligations of results. State parties should consider that they have to fulfill their legal obligations to all women through designing public policies, programs, and institutional frameworks that are aimed at fulfilling the specific needs of women, leading to the full development of their potential on an equal basis with men. CEDAW is part of a comprehensive international human rights legal framework directed at ensuring the enjoyment of all of human rights and at eliminating all forms of discrimination against women on the basis of sex and gender. This convention affirms that discrimination against women, first, violates the principle of equality of rights and respect for human dignity. Second, is an obstacle to the participation of women on equal terms with men. Third, hampers the growth of the prosperity of society and family. And last, acts as a major barrier to the full development of the potentialities of women in the service of their countries and of humanity.